Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to the second channel video. So the United Kingdom has been outside of the European Union for a full 24 hours now, and a lot of people have been asking because it's been a big news story internationally, like, whoa Toycat, you live in the UK, this must be huge for you, right? It's Brexit day, that's crazy, bad / good, depending on which news source you cover, but the truth is, this is a potentially historic thing, maybe, but right now the situation on the ground is exactly the same as it was a few days ago. You can't measure the impact of huge, potentially historic decisions based on the first day or weeks or months, and the truth is things are going to be the same for a long time. It's going to be a while until you can measure history, because you can't measure history on the spot. You can't measure a huge potential ramification on the day of it happening, because history is measured in the long run, not the short run. But you know what can be measured in the short run, just for fun? The European Union Wikipedia page, because I like Wikipedia. It's a great open source of knowledge. I will talk about it forever on this channel and how it's not an unreliable source. Your teacher's just lazy. But what I can talk about is the fact that the European Union page has to change quite significantly because the UK is no longer in there. And the most obvious example is like, well, it's a political union of 27 member states, but every single detail on this change on this page has been changed over the last 24 hours, and I wanted to show you the first effect of the UK leaving the EU, and that is the fact that every single factoid and fact and fun fact about the EU has had to change alongside it. For instance, the population of the EU, instead of being, roughly, 500 million or so, a half billion, is now 447 million. For instance, the largest city in the EU is debatable now. It used to be London, no matter how you measured it, but now for city limits, it's Berlin, and now if you count the metropolitan area, it's Paris. That's right, the EU has two largest cities because there's two different definitions that aren't the same city. Isn't that kind of wacky? There's a billion different things we can go through, and you know what, rather than saying we can go through it, how about we do exactly that in today's video? Because, again, it's a very interesting, again, there's lots of just things that changed yesterday that keep things on the up. Some things are, different, some things are big, but what I really like is this, GIF right here. It's a GIF showing all the countries leaving and joining the EU. It's been, again, the fact that the Wikipedia, people who edit the page, who are volunteers, the fact that they did all of this within 24 hours is something I really love, because it shows, it gives you that kind of historical perspective. It's not some media trying to blast into your face their perspective or their thoughts on a big thing happening, but instead like, oh, 2020, wow, do you see that? The UK is gone. It's weird to see it in that context, because that's how people actually look at this from the future. This is how news actually should work, in my opinion, like showing you how this adds to the story of things so far, not this is the biggest story in history, because right now, again, it is not. It can be, potentially, but it is not right now, and I just love looking at that. I also love looking at things like, okay, if we scroll down to like population, it's like as of 1 February 2020, the population is 447 million, 5.8%. It dipped as a percentage of the whole world population. You can see how like, oh yeah, the EU contains 40 big cities. All of the, cities have kind of gone up a rank, and this means that Frankfurt has now officially become a top 20 EU city. That's right, Frankfurt, which is actually a major hub for Germany and for arguably the whole of the EU. It's got the third or fourth biggest international airport in the EU. It's the transport hub of Germany. It's a big banking city. It's pretty. Look at this city right here. I've been there many times before. It's now a top 20 EU city. Isn't that kind of cool for them? If we look at the craziest one to me though is if you look at the languages in the EU, that has changed significantly. English is no longer the second most spoken native language in the EU, or debatably the third, but the second most spoken native language in the EU. It is now, if you look right here, all the way down alongside Slovak after about 15 other languages. It's still the most spoken if you include second language, because it's the bridge language, but we live in this really wacky world where the EU, as a, like a multinational union, speaks a language between each other. The language of communication is mostly done as a language that isn't the national language of any major state, because Ireland, although they speak English, again, the way Irish and English are treated there, for reasons you can imagine in the making of a nation state, English is a language that they speak, and they are the largest source of native English speakers, but again, it's a whole thing there. And Malta is another EU member state that officially, English is like a language they speak there as their main language, but the fact that, yeah, these two countries now are the sources of native English in the EU, and that's why you get such a low percentage. It's a weird addition to the to the thing. German is now the majority language, or the largest language for first speakers, and then the closest for second speakers. There is a real thing where, because the population has dipped so much, and because Germany stayed the same size, Germany is a pretty sizable proportion of the EU population. It's almost 20% by itself now, which is quite a jump to make, and there's contributions and stuff that have changed for that. But for now, let's talk about the fact that, wow, the number of, like religions have all jumped up and down as a result. Wow, look at this graph right here. Again, every single thing has to be updated. It's like, here's the list of member states, how many MEPs they have. 27 member states. That's kind of wacky. Oh, let's talk about geography, shall we? Because the EU's member states area had to change as well. It's to me very, very interesting. Like, the budget of the EU is something that's also going to have to change because the UK's thing is out there. Every single detail on this change had to be slowly like skimmed through one by one by one. And although it'd be fun to like be like, what about this, that, go through the things one by one. Let's just stay on the key facts because I think they're the most interesting. And let's just mention that the EU has now, English is still used as a language. Like, there's always jokes about like, I guess we'll speak French now. That wouldn't be a very smart, that wouldn't be a very smart thing overall. There's also the thing of like, prior to 2020, no state had left the EU. But, Greenland kind of had, but not really. But the UK is the first country to leave the EU. That's huge. There's now like, oh yeah, Lisbon Treaty. And then there's a little detail of like, oh yeah, did you know the UK left the European Union? That's a fact that is forever in the history there. It's, it's interesting to look at. Also, just to keep on going, for the fun right here, we've got the fact that the GDP and PVP as well as nominal, as well as all the other facts have been altered very slightly. And this is actually quite a huge one in my opinion because, obviously we could look at the fact that the EU Parliament doesn't have the Brexit Party as its largest party anymore. Interestingly enough, the largest party in the European Parliament, national, not multinational, just to be clear. Someone's going to get pedantic and be like, well, actually, they fight as coalitions of many different things, but the EU doesn't make sense in a lot of ways, and that's one of them. But anyway, so basically the largest individual national party in the EU was the Brexit Party. So no, I think Italy, they're not like as anti-EU as literally the Brexit Party is called the Brexit Party. So that's an interesting change as well. But also, here's the really big one to me. It was debatable as to which economy in the world was larger, the United States or the EU. Before this point. Again, it was very close, and because of the way measuring economies isn't precise, you could make the argument the European Union was the largest economy or joint largest economy. And even between 2004 and 2014, it was the largest union in the world, undoubtedly. Again, after that point, it's much harder to be certain. But the point is that the US and the EU were pretty similarly sized economies, but that has actually changed significantly. The EU is now like about 6/7 the size of the United States economy. Obviously, the UK and Germany, all countries are measured separately. The EU is measured as well of those because whether the EU is a country or organization or confederation or federation or body or trade state, whatever it is, it doesn't set itself as just one of those things for reasons that maybe are good to you or maybe are not good to you. But basically the EU is no longer the world's second largest economy, or the world's largest economy perhaps. It is definitely the world's second largest. And here's the craziest bit. Because of that huge dip, they are now, because China is growing at a crazy rate, the EU is likely to even dip into third place. So yeah, the thing about the UK leading the EU that is often kind of mentioned is like, haha, sucks to be the UK, falling apart now. And that, if you believe that, there is definitely place for it. But it's hard to look at a breaking up of, two parties, especially, one with its second largest member or third largest, depending on how you're counting. But to take when you take a large part away from the union, you do create this thing where like, oh yeah, the union has lost a serious portion, it's lost its biggest city. It's lost, it's one of its biggest contributors. It's lost a lot of its stuff, as well as all of that. And because it lost such a sizable chunk of economy, population, etc., there are some real changes in the way that the things interact. Also, because it lost such a Eurosceptic member, it can move forwards in more integrational ways. So maybe that's good for the EU to become the country that maybe it wants to be someday. But it's a really, really interesting body. And this is a really interesting decision, not just for the UK, but for the EU. It always has to be mentioned, like, man, it's always fun to, like, again, if you're super, on the right, if you read right-wing news, it's about how bad the EU is going to do. If it's super left-wing news, it's about how, bad the UK is going to do. The reality of the situation is, those are both inflammatory viewpoints. If you buy those up and you're like, haha, Scotland, Northern Ireland are definitely 100% leaving, because I read it in the news and I'm real smart, or Reddit told me, the truth is the real viewpoint isn't one of those two things. The real viewpoint is we don't know what's going to happen. The real viewpoint is what happens with the UK and the EU from here is entirely down to how they define their future relationship. Because the UK has in fact left. If do you want to confirm that? Do you want to read it on Wikipedia? There's something called Brexit. What's that all about? I have not heard of this Brexit thing. We should do a bit of reading, I reckon. But no, the real deal is that the UK and the EU, now that they are officially apart, even though I'd say the EU has way more cards at this point because of the way the transition deal goes, but because the United Kingdom's membership of the European ended 47 years after it joined, because that has happened, there is now it's done. There's no like debate over that. The question of how do you make a beneficial future relationship for both sides is now going to begin in much more serious context. It's also been happening in the back rooms, but now that can happen in the front rooms. I guess publicly is not... I mean, your front room isn't public, but it's more public than your back room. If you open the curtains in the front room, then it's happening in the front room is my point. And that is the thing we're going to be seeing happening soon. I can't talk geopolitics about this until things actually happen. Right now, the way it works is the UK and the EU negotiate on something the EU reckons they can't do in the year, and the UK really wants done in a year. And based on the UK's speed with Brexit-related negotiations so far, you would assume it would take more than a year based on those two things. But yeah, basically both sides are negotiating on some form of trade deal to replace the current situation, which is the UK pretends it's a member until they sign a trade deal. And that will define a lot about how the world goes as a whole. Because, yeah, I mean, also, the way the UK now deals with all the other countries as well. Like, the UK and the US, for instance, something trade deals. We can talk about this a lot, actually. There's a lot of things that have to go on in the next year. And I want to keep you updated because this is going to be a potentially very big year for the UK. This, unlike what people will like to tell you, this is the year where the things actually happen that will determine whether Brexit is successful, whether Brexit is a success or good or bad for the UK and for the EU. And that all determines on how the weird, wacky alliances of the world work. And I'm curious to see how that plays out. If you care about the world, you should be curious too. If you care about your political side and you live in the UK, of course, you can be upset or thrilled regardless of all those sorts of things. But this channel is, generally speaking, here to talk about things that are happening rather than things that sound like they might be happening. But that's how I see things. Maybe you disagree. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. This video is just like, I think it's... isn't it weird, like, people just went for it? All the facts about the UK and the EU, they all changed overnight, just flipping. See, like, something to me about seeing the population of the EU change, or, like, last polity withdrawn as a thing. Something about that is, like... It's very, very real when you see the numbers change. And maybe that just means that I'm a number person. Or maybe it means that second channel, have a nice day. Goodbye.